Welcome to Nearpod Lesson 6.2, where we're going to continue our discussion on basics of chemical equations, focusing on coefficients and subscripts. So, as always, a reminder to title your notes this, and by the end of the video, these are the two things you need to know. Please make sure to write this down in your notes. So once again, our goal in this unit is to figure out how medications are made. And we're going to start with the understanding of a basic recipe in chemistry. We call that a chemical equation. So something that you should know is essentially what a coefficient represents. So a coefficient are the numbers written before the molecule. So I've written these in red here, and they tell you how many of that molecule you need. So notice there's a 2 in front of H2, which means I have 2 molecules of H2, right? And if there's no number written, it doesn't mean that there are 0 O2s. It just means that there's one of them, right? And the 2 in front of H2O represents that there are 2 H2Os. Right? So coefficients again is just the number in front of the molecule in a chemical equation. In addition to the definition, I would definitely write down the equation and the image below to help you out. For me, I color code things, but if you don't have different colors, feel free to use different shapes as well. All right, a subscript, on the other hand, let's use another color to represent that, are the numbers written on the bottom right of each element in a molecular formula. So we've talked about this before, and this is mainly just to review. So this essentially tells you that if I have 2 of these things, H2s, within each molecule, or within each purple circle, how many H's do I have? Well, if my subscript is 2, then I'm going to have 1, 2, right? And since I have 2 of these, if I want to figure out how many H's I need total, I just multiply the subscript by the coefficient. 2 times 2 is 4. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 H's in total, 2 in each of the molecules for H2. Right? Here I only have 1 O2. So this 2 means I have 2 elements of O. Right? So here it gets a little bit complicated. I have 2 molecules of H2O. If I just want to figure out how many H's I have, here it says 2. So in each molecule, I have 2. But if I want to figure out how many H's I have in total, I need to take the subscript 2 and multiply it by my coefficient 2. 2 times 2 is 4. And if I double check the picture, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 H's in total, right? What if I want to figure out how many O's I have? And if I don't have this picture to help me out, if there's no number down here, that basically means I have 1 O. And just like I did with the H, I need to multiply it by how many molecules I have total, or the coefficient 2 in red. So 1 times 2 is going to be 2. So I should have 2 O's. And if I check the picture, I have 1, 2 O's. Right? So it's very important to identify the coefficient and subscript to figure out how many elements we have in total, because later on we'll be talking about if I have an incomplete recipe, where I only have the reactants and I want to figure out what I make and how many of that thing I will make, there's very important steps that relate to the coefficients and the subscripts, right? So I would definitely write down the two definitions and this upper area that we annotated up here. Okay, so let's try some practice problems. Now, before I start on any of these practice problems, there are three things I need to remember. So one, the coefficient is the number of molecules. So this is the large number in front of the molecule that we draw here. And the subscript is the number of elements in a molecule. So the subscript is this number here for some of these elements. So I went ahead and fixed the coefficient so that they're more purple. So you can tell that purple is the coefficient, pink is our subscript. So when I'm reading a problem, I want to pay attention to whether it's asking for molecules, where I'm going to use the coefficients, or elements, where I use the subscripts. Right, so question number 1 asks, how many molecules of CH4 are needed in the chemical equation? So I'm going to look for CH4, and here is CH4. And because it's asking for how many molecules I have total, I'm going to look for my coefficient, which is the large number in front. There's no number here, which doesn't mean 0. It just means 1. Right? So in this case, there's no number written. That means 1. So I'm going to need 1 molecule of CH4. Question number 2 asks, how many elements total of H are there in the molecule CH4? Right, in the chemical equation. So here I'm looking for a total number of elements because it says how many elements total, right? So the total number of elements. So just like we did in the previous slide, to find the total number of H's, right? It's 4 H's times 1. So I'm going to have 4 H's in CH4. So 4 H's total in CH4. Ignore the scribble. Sorry, this is hard to see. Question number 3 asks, how many elements total of Cl are there in the molecule Cl2? So again, I'm looking for elements total. So if I'm looking for the total number of elements, I need to take the coefficient times the subscript, right? And specifically, it's talking about the molecule Cl2. So again, I'm going to look for the molecule Cl2 for this question. Cl2 is here. And again, because it's asking for how many elements total, I'm going to take the subscript 2 and multiply it by 4. So 2 times 4 will be 8. So therefore, I'm going to have 8 Cl's in Cl2 for the chemical equation. So I'm going to write Chem, EQN for shorts. So at this point, you should be able to complete the practice problems on the next slide on your own. But if you're kind of struggling with this, there is another way to solve this. So I'm going to show you how to do a different way of solving it if this is kind of confusing for you. So the other method is just kind of drawing things out, right? So for example, there's no number in front, which means I have 1. And I have one of these things called CH4. So I can just draw one CH4 like so, right? Additionally, in here, I have 4 Cl2s. So I can also draw Cl2 just like in a circle 4 times. And then there's an arrow. And afterwards, I have this no number in front, so I only have one of them. So 1 CCl4. Forgot to circle Cl2 from before, so I just fixed that. And then lastly, running out of colors, let's do pink. So there's no number in front of HCl, so that means I just have one of them, right? So I have 1 HCl. All right, so if I draw it out this way, I can do the problems again. So let me erase these answers and then show you that I'll end up getting the same answer. Okay, so doing these same 3 problems again, just in a slightly different way, if the first way was a little bit confusing, right? So 1, how many molecules of CH4? Remember, molecules are these whole things together. So what I circled in red, orange, blue, and pink. So since it's asking for CH4, how many CH4s do I have in total? Right, well, I only have one thing of CH4 that I drew out, so I have 1. Right, question number 2 asks, how many elements total? Right, so I'm just looking at elements. Are in the molecule CH4 in the chemical equation. So I'm going to look inside CH4. I only have one circle. How many H's do I have? Well, I only have 4, the number 4 next to the letter H. So I have 4. Question number 3 asks, how many elements total are there in the molecule Cl2? Right? So notice here that there are 4 Cl2s that I drew out because of the number 4 in purple. So since it's asking for elements, I need to count out how many Cl's I have in the circles. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8 because it's Cl2. 2 plus 2 is 4, plus 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8. So I have 8 Cl's within Cl2, right? So instead, I can just draw things out if the multiplication is a bit tricky.